seated if you like as I pray. There's many different needs that are represented in our program that come in by calls or people have written them in, but how many of you would say, I have a need? I'm not going to make you talk about it. You don't need to come down here or anything, but just lift your hand and say, I have a need. Okay, look around. Eyes open. Okay, you can put your hands back down, but you're not the only one. Right? There's other people. We're in this together. We're in this together. We want to pray for Jerry. I know she's going through some health things, and Renee's back there representing Patty Nelson, and what Patty's battling right now. I can just continue to pray for my family if you would. I know there's some other needs as well that are out there. I want to pray for a former pastor from Anaconda, Tony Fitzgerald, who used to pastor the New Life Pentecostal Church. He's moved back to his home country on the Ohio River on the Kentucky side, but he's having some breathing issues, some health things, and so I want to pray for him. Somebody in that congregation that he's a part of tested positive for the virus, and so just kind of some concerns there for him, and that oppressive humidity and heat, and keep Kentucky. I'll live in Montucky, that's fine, but you can keep Kentucky. So just lots of different things in our country and so on. So we just go to the Lord to reach out to Him in these times. And so I'm going to pray, and then I'm going to pause at a point, and then whatever your thing was, if you lifted your hand, just whisper that to God. Just think about God. What I lifted my hand up for, I give it to you now. Let's do that.
I was talking to him on the phone as we were coming to church, and remember he makes you to church and you praying. First son Ray is not doing well. He has some kind of a lung issue, and she said he's having a whole lot of problems, and she asked that we pray for him.
Okay. Let's do that. God, we want to come to you. We thank you that you are able, and you are willing. But it's in our minds and the timing and the means, the way that you make this all happen, that you bring about the answers. We don't have the ability, we don't have the privilege of being able to script it and to write it out and say, God, do it this way. And point 2 should follow point 1, which will be followed by point 3. We don't get to script how it happens. But we can trust you in the process. Because you're in the process with us. We're not left alone in this. And you are with us. So we want to lift up Pastor Tony and what he's going through. For this Ray, that he's having breathing difficulties. God, we don't know about, there's maybe others that are, and the number of virus reports is going up in our area, and so I pray that people will just be considerate of one another. We pray for Patty, that she's battling COPD, that you would help her to get the air in that she needs, and be strengthened, and be encouraged, and enjoy time with her family, and that she would encourage them, because she encouraged me when I went by the other day and visited and prayed with her. So God, let her just continue to do that. I'm going to lift up just so many that are going through health issues, people that are having spiritual kinds of things, relational kinds of things, families that have been stuck together more than they've been stuck together before, and so the wears on nerves. And God, I pray that you'd give us your peace in our hearts and our minds, and that would guard us, protect us from reacting in the wrong ways, but responding instead with Lord, we pray for our nation. We pray that as your people, we would speak the truth, but we would do it in love. We pray for our leaders on down at the various levels, the ones that sit across the aisle, so to speak, in government positions, that they would learn to speak the truth in love and be peacemakers. God, we pray that for our country, pray in our world as well, that we would be an example of you to the world. God, thank you for just a gorgeous day that we can come together. And it's days like today, we wish we had a retractable roof here, just to, not too bright, but just maybe retractable side walls or something, so we can just enjoy beauty around us and share a little bit of music and stuff with the neighbors too. That'd be great. Wake them up on Sunday morning. God, thank you for those who are here, that are gathered, for those who will be watching later on the internet, joining us that way. Those who will be joining live when the message comes around, that your truth would sink down deep and create life and fruit in each one of us. Thank you, Jesus. Thank you that we can count on that you're around us, you're within us, and that we're not alone. It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. This is how I fight my battles. This is how I fight my battles. This is how I fight my battles. This is how. This is how I fight my battles. This is how I fight my battles. This is how I fight my battles. This is how it may look like. It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. Well, it may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. This is how I fight my battles. This is how I fight my battles. This is how I fight my battles. This is how. This is how I fight my battles. This is how I fight my battles. This is how I fight my battles. This is how. The battle isn't ours. The battle is the Lord's. The Bible tells us that as well. The story from last week that Stephen shared that scripture with us, that there's more with us than are with them. An old Christian comedian talked about it, that Jesus said 1/3 of the angels were kicked out of heaven, and they came down and they're under the dominion of the enemy. 1 out of 3 were kicked out. But he talked about that still means the good outnumbers the bad 2 to 1. Those are good odds. Those are good odds. And God's on our side. enveloping you. He's surrounding you. He's putting his protection. He's putting his love, his power, his peace, his hope around you. Oh, he'll fill you up from the inside out, but know on the outside you're protected too. We just pray your presence in this place, in us, with us, wherever we go, that we're bringing you to a world that's hurting. We don't do things the way the world does. We don't grieve as those who have no hope. We don't fight our battles. We don't use the weapons that other people do. You fight our battles. We're a part of them, but you take charge. And we want to let you be large and in charge and take care of it. Thank you, Jesus. Thank you that you're there, leading the armies, the hosts of heaven. Thank you, Lord. Amen. Amen. It's a beautiful picture that he's given us today. So take that to heart. And just let him surround you today.
Are you ready for some trivia? Terrific! Our questions today come from the stories of Peter from the book of Acts. All right, here we go. Do you know what Peter's job was before following Jesus? Was he A, an actor? B, a carpenter? C, a fisherman? Or D, a fireman? No, he wasn't a fireman. No, not an actor. Which was it? Carpenter or fisherman? He was a fisherman. Great job, everybody. All right, next question. There was a man named Cornelius. What was he also known as? A, a soldier. B, a centurion. C, John Mark. Or D, Harry? Nope, not a soldier. Not Harry either. Is it John? Nope, it's B, a centurion. Awesome job. All right, next question. What was the church earnestly doing while Peter was in prison? A, waiting. B, sleeping. C, partying. Or D, praying. Nope, they weren't sleeping. They were partying. Was it waiting or praying? It was praying. Great job, everybody. All right, last question. King Herod was eaten by frogs? B, worms? C, kittens? Or D, birds? playing.
Back to our series on
Everyone turned it on this time.
the Sermon on the Mound, which is my pun for Sermon on the Mount, as we look at those chapters in Matthew 5, 6, and 7 to look at what Jesus said when he gathered a bunch of people together on the side of a mountain and he began to teach them. And we know that there were other times that there were thousands of people that gathered around Jesus and heard him speak and teach because he fed thousands of people and he had been teaching then. And so that area where this is traditionally thought to be, there are just a big open hillside, I think easily 15,000 people or more could sit on that hillside and listen in. Today our message, we continue on, we're still in chapter 5. We continue on in with a message that I've entitled today, Eye-Tooth. Eye-Tooth. And we'll see why in just a few moments. Peter the Great was a Tsar of Russia. Now I love some of these people who, none of you are introduced to me as John the Great or Joe the Great or Bob the Great or any of that kind of stuff. But some of these kings and leaders like this, I don't know if they kind of self-dub themselves. Oh, I'm Pastor Philip the Great. What? But this guy, Peter the Great, and maybe, as I did some research about this guy, he stood almost 7 feet tall. Oh. This is back in the early 1900s, so that guy is kind of a freak of nature back then. There weren't that many super tall people back then, but Peter the Great had an interest in medicine and anatomy, and so one of his attendants that worked with him one day came to him and said that he needed Peter to remove his wife's tooth. And Peter had all these like vices and grips and all these different things. And so he goes over to this man's home and he goes in and he starts removing this woman's tooth. And she's protesting, she's hollering, she's fighting, and he's just going on. And he pulls her tooth. Even though she's, just in panic, she's protesting against all this. And several days later, he finds out that the woman never had a toothache at all. That she and her husband had a marriage quarrel, and this was his way to get revenge against her. Talk about tooth for a tooth. Okay? So he gets revenge on her. Some of us will remember from The Godfather, Don Corleone, and he talked like that. And he says, revenge is a dish best served cold. Somebody else said something about that. Then they found out that it just meant getting back at someone else. It didn't mean like creme brulee is a dish best served cold. Like what? So revenge is not really something edible, but it is getting back at someone. What we're looking at in Matthew chapter 5, verses 38 through 42, and just for your sake and just for my sake, because I'm kind of running short on time this week and spending some time with family and so on, I've blessed you with splitting this message that should be one into two. So you have to get part 2 next week. That doesn't mean it won't be any shorter, but anyway, the thought content is less. So I will try to stick on track here. So this is the passage that we'll have to look at 2 weeks in a row. So Jesus is saying, you have heard that it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say to you, Do not resist the one who is evil. But if anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to him the other also. And if anyone would sue you and take your tunic, let him have your cloak as well. And if anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go with him 2 miles. Give to the one who begs from you, and do not refuse the one who would borrow from you. So Jesus gathers these people together, and he's teaching them these things. And so we have been trying to unpack that, trying to expand on what this is saying so that we understand it more clearly. And what we're basically coming down to in what today and next Sunday we'll be talking about is this main idea, is being willing to suffer loss yourself rather than cause another to suffer. Willing to suffer loss yourself rather than cause someone else to. So it isn't always eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. To some people, and we're really just looking at the first verse today, to some people this verse is kind of a moral inspiration. That, what Jesus continues on, so you've heard it said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. And so they draw some things, and Jesus is really starting to talk about ethics and morals and how we interact with other people. But some people have taken it out of context and use it even as a basis for revenge, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But Leo Tolstoy was a Russian social reformer in the 19th century or the 1800s. And some of these people currently, they think they have beards. That guy, look at that, that's a beard. Okay, so he's
looking in the mirror.
Rocking it 150 years ago. He thought that this meant that there should be no physical force ever used. That there should be no courts of law, there needed to be no police or armed forces. He thought that even criminals were basically good-natured.
Kind of what they're saying right
Eye
now.
for an eye, tooth for tooth. Just don't rock the boat. No force needed. Mahatma Gandhi was a philosopher and a prime minister in India. He also took the approach that perfect government would have no police force, no punishment, that prisons should be turned into schools, that truth would bring victory. And he's known for saying this next quote that comes up. An eye for an eye makes the whole world blind.
Remember that.
And so people have been inspired by what Jesus said, but there's some misunderstanding. Some of these ideas may sound admirable. And what we're hearing from some people in different sources in our country, that we should do this, that we should do that. And some of it sounds good, but how practical is it? But in this case especially, it is unbiblical. It is not what the Bible teaches, what Tolstoy said, what Gandhi said. In Romans 13, the government and authority is from God. He gave people on earth authority to carry things out. And here's Romans 12:17. Do not repay anyone evil for evil. Okay, it's not eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. Do not repay anyone evil for evil. Be careful to do what is right in the eyes of everybody. And then he would follow that under the inspiration of the Holy Spirit with Romans 13. He said all authority comes from God. The government, whether good or bad, indifferent, whatever, that's been established by God. And those who keep society in line. Now, I'm not just saying that because we have police officers and people who work in law enforcement and who work in the prisons. in our church, but that has been established by God. I mean, nobody would, in a perfect world, we wouldn't need that. But guess what? We're not in that perfect world. And so we do, because the tendency of humans is to go towards chaos. It's to do their own thing. And it kind of becomes both survival of the fittest, the law of, the biggest guy in town, kind of a thing. And so it's not biblical. So some people take this as a moral inspiration, and they say more things, and it sounds good, but others just plain misquote this, and that usually comes from those who are vengeful. It becomes a misquotation by the vengeful. Those who would say that this is a basis for revenge. There is in Latin law the lex talionis, the law of retaliation. And many have used this to take the law into their own hands. Well, that was the Roman thing at the time, this law of retaliation. And so other cultures had that. Jesus is just reiterating, and we'll look at that in just a moment, where he's basing this upon in Scripture. We repay evil for evil. And I think the difficulty for us is that we all enjoy revenge stories. Don't we? Because this next guy, he is a hero. Good old Robin Hood. Steal from the rich and give to the poor. Repay the evil that the rich have been doing with evil to them. Because we are the ones who are supposed to be bringing revenge. Now, I love a good Robin Hood story. I like to see it seems like good is triumphing over evil, but the means that he uses to get there is not. And we see that on a lot of television shows and stuff. Like, it doesn't matter all the bad you do as long as good wins in the end. But the end doesn't justify the means. Because you can't do all this immoral stuff to all of a sudden have one little smidgen, is that really a word? I don't know. But of good that comes out of it. Leviticus chapter 24, verses 17 to 21. If anyone takes the life of a human being, he must be put to death. Anyone who takes the life of someone's animal must make restitution, life for life. If anyone injures his neighbor, whatever he has done must be done to him. Fracture for fracture, eye for eye, tooth for tooth. As he has injured the other, so he is to be injured. And there's a couple other references, Exodus 21, Deuteronomy 19, where this is repeated again, and so that's the basis of what Jesus is saying. You've heard it said, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. This is the law. This is the rule set down by God, given through Moses for the people of God. It allowed limited punishment, equal to the crime. Injury for injury. Obviously, as it shows here, this can amp up to life for life. But it's interesting that God breaks through that in Exodus chapter 21, verses 26 and 27, and he gives us this idea of restitution. There can be some compensation, there can be some payment. In this case, it said if someone was injured, in certain cases, that person was to be set free. If they were a slave and they were injured, they were given freedom. They didn't really necessarily come back against their master, their owner, as a servant and get revenge that way. They were just given freedom. And what Jesus is talking about here, when we look at more of that, some people are going to think that that's a wimpy way of handling things. That Jesus is saying, you don't get to have an eye for an eye, tooth for... You don't have the freedom of having revenge. That's the wimpy way out. Tough guys stand up for themselves. You gotta defend yourself, kid. Now, even my dad said, like, I was getting picked on at school. And he said, well, you gotta kind of defend yourself a little bit there. It didn't work. They were still bigger. There were still more of them. Okay? That's why I turned into a cross-country runner. I could outrun them long enough. But just continuing to have injustice for injustice in the natural human thing is not just to do it equal, eye for an eye. You knocked out one of my eyes, I'm taking both of yours. You lopped off one of my ears, I'm lopping off both of yours. You took one of my cattle, I'm taking all of yours. We amp it up. We want to get back more. Make them hurt more because we are hurting. We're going to look at a biblical illustration. Next week we'll look at 4 illustrations that Jesus talks about. But this week I just want to look back, and it's one before Jesus ever came about on earth, obviously. But just to kind of show you that all along, and we need to see that in the Bible, there's the law of God that's very cut and dry, but all along God is giving grace. God's not letting people get off because the punishment went on Jesus. By his punishment, we're set free. By his punishment, we receive grace. But God gives grace or helps people give grace, but they aren't always doing the revenge thing. So our biblical illustration is about Joseph and his family. In Genesis chapter 37, I'm just recapping a seriously long story with just a few verses. But they, his brothers, saw Joseph in the distance, and before he reached them, they plotted to kill him. Here comes that dreamer, they said to each other. Come now, let's kill him and throw him into one of these cisterns and say that a ferocious animal devoured him. Then let's see what comes of his dreams. They ended up changing their plan. But it all came about because God had given Joseph some dreams, and just very simply boiling this down, he was immature. The Bible never really talks about Joseph sinning. Now he did, I'm sure, but and this is what we want to say was his sin. His sin was immaturity. Because he shares with his family the dreams from God, and they weren't ready for them yet, so there's some problems on their part. But he shared these things that maybe he should have kept to himself. About how things would turn around in 2 different dreams, and his family would come to him and honor him. They didn't like that, because he was one of the booger-picking little brothers. They didn't like that. So they plotted to eliminate him, changed it into selling him into slavery. And so these are just some images that somebody's put together. And so off he goes with the Midianites to Egypt. There in Egypt, he's away from home. It's a very different culture. He's forced into work in a home, and he's used to being out and about. And so as he's sold into slavery there, he becomes, in the household where he works, he's sexually harassed by the woman of the house. He's falsely accused by her. He's wrongly imprisoned by her husband. He's helpful to some people in prison, but he's forgotten. But as we read through from the beginning where I was reading there in Genesis 37 and 38, it's just kind of a brain verse or chapter that's put in there about Judah, and then you have to pick it back up in 39 and continue on. But as we read there, it says that God was with him, that God was looking at him, that God was taking notice of Joseph. God would eventually reverse his situation from being a prisoner to becoming a prince in a day. Somebody remembered him. He interpreted some dreams. He gave a plan. Pharaoh says, "You're the guy. I want you." And he gets a wife, all in the same day.
That's rough.
Wow. Talk about a shocking set of events. But the fulfillment of the dreams he had received from God, and as he interpreted dreams for Pharaoh as well, they began to unfold. And it brought his long-lost family to Egypt because they were hungry. The famine came about and they were hungry, and so a bunch of those brothers packed up and came down for some supplies. They brought some payment in exchange for that. And it's just interesting, just as I focused on this the last couple of days, looking this over again, and I'm not really totally able to unpack all of this, but I know Max Lucado has a new series out, You'll Get Through This, and it's about Joseph. I've seen some of the videos, and that might be some inspiration. I love the story of Joseph. I'd love to just be able to expand on this and just go with it. So that might be something that God's directing us to in the future. But it's very interesting how he handles the challenge of revenge. Will he be vengeful against his brothers? How will he confront them and the pain and the wrong that they have done to him? And at first, I'm not going to say he was evil in this, but he kind of messes with them. Okay? When they first come, he accuses them of being spies. When he finally releases them, he keeps one of his brothers as collateral that they will come back. That they're telling the truth. He wants to see all the family because his little brother was left behind. His only full brother. He messes with them because he puts their payments back in their grain sacks, and they find that and they think, oh man. And their father says, what were you guys thinking? You know, they're like, we paid him. It just like appeared. Why did you say you had a little brother? He was just quizzing us. We didn't know he was going to say, bring him back. Well, now I've lost another son. I've lost my first son. He was killed by animals. His dad doesn't even know the truth about him. But they get hungry again, and so their dad gives in and sends them all off. Back in Egypt, Joseph invites them over for dinner.
Talk about
It's a
close,
plot to attack us and get us all into one place in his house, and he's just going to exact judgment on us. God is against us. But he treats them royally. He even seats them in birth order.
that right there.
Oldest to youngest. Yeah. Remember, there's like 11 of them, okay? So it's not just like, I'm the oldest, yep, you're the youngest, okay. Then it has to go on. And then he sends them off again, but he has his servants put the money back in the bags, and then he hides his favorite cup in there. Brings them back again. They're pleading, let us take our little brother back as we kill our father. All this stuff's going on. Chapter 46, he finally reveals himself. He's broken. If we read that, we'll look at that later, another time, but he's just broken. He's torn up. He keeps sending people in and out, and goes behind the curtain, washes his face to get rid of the tears. But finally he says, it's me. It's your brother. And years pass then, and the whole family moves down. They get the Primo property in Egypt, but years pass and Dad dies. They're like, okay, now it's going to happen. He just didn't want to get revenge while Dad was alive. But here's our last couple of verses. Joseph said to them, do not be afraid. I love this line. Am I in the place of God? I'm not going to play God here. Because you intended to harm me, but God intended it for good. To accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. Your lives and the people here in Egypt, too. God used all that, orchestrated all that. There's no reason to get revenge because good is working out. So we come back to Jesus, and we're kind of saying, like, Jesus, why, if this eye for an eye and tooth for tooth had worked really well for a while, why did you seem to throw it out? It's because of stories like Joseph. Because grace wins. Love wins out. And he knows, like, just like we looked at the account of why he said, okay, and originally God said, yes, you can have a divorce, because he knew people's hearts become hardened. And why did he say originally eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth? Because people's hearts are hard. And they want to get back. God has to change that. And Jesus is using the illustration of Joseph and using others, because if we look at some of the other law, David should have been dead for what he did. A lot of other Old Testament people should have been taken out and given a long walk or whatever they did. Stoning, I know, it was awful. So next week we're going to look at not just the illustration from the Bible of Joseph, 4 illustrations that Jesus gives us. 4 ways practically, and that's just 4 out of many that we can put into practice in our lives of showing grace rather than revenge. So we conclude and just kind of talking about that, because why do we need to do that? Because revenge is a powerful temptation. And it plays to our human nature. Russell Tavares was mad and began to exchange barbs with another man, John Anderson, in Waco, Texas. Now, we've already heard about Waco, Texas, so just kind of know there's different people from Waco. Okay? But Russell lives on the East Coast in Virginia, just was released and discharged from the military, from the Navy, where he was a fire controlman. And because of this exchange back and forth between him and John Anderson, he hops in his car and drives 1,300 miles from Virginia to outside of Waco, Texas. Not without stopping and taking selfies of him as he crosses all the state boundaries of Oklahoma, so on, Texas, wherever he's traveling through. I know Oklahoma's not next to Virginia. I know these things. I'm a map freak. Just, it's the sake of illustration. So he pulled up to Mr. Anderson's house, doused it with gasoline, and lit it on fire. Mr. Anderson lost everything. The house burned down. It was all over some embarrassing photos that Mr. Anderson somehow found and began to post of Russell with his pants up really high, high water, and he would post underneath it, "Revenge of the Nerds." Well, the nerd got revenge on him and burned his house down. But Russell couldn't let it go. account that I found says that even at his sentencing, I don't know why he had, but he still had his cell phone and he's snapping photos of the other guy and himself in court. This guy won't let it go.
Reality. He's not with reality.
People often react too quickly, and we react in anger, especially when difficulty is fueling that anger. God is inviting us to respond in a different way. The Bible even tells us in Ephesians that in our anger, it is possible that we don't sin. In your anger, do not sin. That even when we're angry, we don't have to sin. We don't have to pop that guy. We don't have to say that bar to that person. It is possible. Revenge is not required. How does this look? How do we respond like Jesus would want us to? Could it be that we take a moment to assess the situation? Could it be that we pray for God to give us perspective on the situation? Could it be, as I mentioned before, we speak the truth in love? I don't know what it looks like for you to respond to other people in those situations with humility and not revenge. To have God in your heart and the confidence that He gives you that He's going to take care of it. I don't even have time to go into all of this. In Romans chapter 12, it just says, don't take revenge. I'll take care of it, God says. I'll take care of it. We might think this would be the perfect revenge. But His is best. And it's final. I'm going to invite the musicians to come. And we're going to close with a song. It might seem a little bit different it's about following Jesus, but really it's in the chorus are the words that we're looking at where it says, Christ is enough for me. I don't need anything else. I don't need revenge. I don't need this to over my enemies. But Jesus is all and everything that I need. I'm going to ask you to bow your heads and close your eyes with me, and we're going to pray. I'll ask you as I found this kind of written out prayer, but kind of went along with some of the stuff that I was closing with there. And so I invite you to pray with me, because there's in our country we've seen this recently. That yes, there was some injustice done to various people, but many people have done injustice back, and other people have jumped on the bandwagon to fuel that. So they're shooting police officers and blaming the one side, and oh my word, it goes on and on. I just read about yesterday 2 police officers ambushed in Texas. Nobody was hurt, but a man drove his car into a Catholic church in Florida this morning and then tried to set the church on fire. Nobody was injured. They were able to get out and get the fire out, and they caught the guy. Oh my word, he just didn't agree with Catholic church teaching. Well, you don't need to ram their building. Sit down and talk with a priest or something, or go to a different church, buddy. So here we are. Let's pray together. Jesus, teach me to respond to difficulties as you do. Let my motivations and my actions reflect humility and God confidence. May your ongoing transformation happening within me be evident in my words and my attitudes, especially when I'm angry. In your name, amen. Just in front of our feet, but to lift up our eyes to the hills, to the mountains, to the heavens, to you, the maker of heaven and earth, to fix our eyes on you, Jesus, to fix our eyes on the prize of being called home heavenward to be with you and our loved ones that have gone on before, to keep our eyes on you. Oh yes, we see things in the peripheral. We see other distractions, but we keep our eyes on you. No No distractions that would make it that we leave the path. But God, to keep our eyes lifted up, focused on you, and always pointing other people to you, directing them to you and to the hope that is in you. That doesn't have to be eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, Hatfields versus McCoys over and over again. But that your grace can break through and freedom can happen. And we long for that in our lives. We long to be able to bring that into the lives of others that are caught in that cycle. So Lord, we want to step in with you and say, here's our junk, and we'll take up all the good. I can't even explain all the things, the forgiveness and joy, etc. that you give. I love that word, Lord, etc. More and more and more grace upon grace that you give to us. Lord, send your people out and enjoy this beautiful day. Enjoy your creation. Enjoy life with you. Because you are enough and more than enough. Lord, we continue to remember those who are hurting and sick and in need of you today. Strengthen them. Lift up their eyes to you. We pray. God, be with us as we go. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Have a great week. See you Wednesday.